this virtual workshop. Now, Dr. Vivek Chand Chandlu will be talking to us. He's an eminent professor with an Indian botanist and academic, renowned as an expert and scholar in the field of molecular biology, biotechnology, and biochemistry. And he's also with bioluminescent family in the field of embryology. Dr. Vivek was born in Himachal Pradesh. He attended.
Sorry, sir. Some echo is creating from your side, sir. It is not clearly audible.
Am I audible now, sir?
Sir, you are audible, but not exactly. That means some echo is creating from your side.
Okay, let me see if I can switch off the fan. Now, has it come down?
Yes, sir, you're okay.
No, okay. Thank you. I continue from where I left. Dr. Vivek, of course, was from Sargad College of Himachal Pradesh University, Shimla. After that, he went on to do his post-graduation in botany from BRAU University in 2003. He did that. And then in 2004, he did his MPhil in the Department of Biology of Orchids at Punjab University, Chandigarh. And he also has his PhD work on mycology and plant pathology, etc. Now, he's a very, very research person. I'm sure he has served as a resource person, as a speaker in several national, international seminars, workshops, conferences, symposia, etc. And we look forward to listening to Dr. Vivek. He's going to talk to us on writing scientific research paper. I now request Dr. Vivek to make his presentation. Sir, the stage is yours. Please continue from.
Thank you, Professor Diva.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
My PPT is visible on
this
virtual platform in full screen.
It's not in full screen. You can use the slideshow if you want.
So I think there is a technical glitches in the software, but it is visible as a full screen in my screen.
Okay.
So should I start in this this way?
It's visible. The screen is clearly visible. You can proceed, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers to give me opportunity to interact with researchers of different continents of the world and to share my views on the topic, writing scientific research paper. Dear friends, I hope you are getting valuable information in this faculty development program. So you want to write a scientific paper or an academic paper, and you want to publish it in a peer-reviewed journal. I am going to talk you through the purpose of how to write the research paper and what it is that goes into the various sections of the paper. So Dr. Lakshmi has explained beautifully many sections of the writing, the research articles, but I'm going to discuss them in different way. So this is the agenda. What is the scientific writing, suggestion for some scientific writing, how to write a scientific paper, then there is some practical tips for scientific writing, language issues, some ethics, and then plagiarism, and then summarize my work. So first of all, what is the scientific writing? So scientific writing is a technical form of writing that is designed to communicate scientific information to other scientists. For example, a journal articles, a scientific poster, or a research proposal. So scientific writing is not just writing about science. It is the technical writing that scientists do to communicate their research to others. So type of academic writing that may be descriptive, analytic, persuasive, critical, and they are just striving for the clarity, cohesion, and consciousness. So there may be different types of scientific writing. Similar principles apply to any type of scientific writing, but the purpose and constraint may be different. That is review articles, thesis, book and book chapters, reports, conference papers, some case studies, discussion papers, some presentations like oral and posters. So what is scientific paper? So scientific paper are for sharing your own original research work with other scientists or for reviewing the research conducted by others. So when anyone writes a research paper, they build upon what they know about the subject and what other experts know. So scientific papers based on experimental typically that include the 5 predominant sections as discussed by Dr. Lakshmi, MRAD format, that is abstract, introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So there are some suggestions for writing the good scientific papers. So know your audience and write for that specific audience. Scientific and technical writing is never a general purpose, but written for a specific audience. That is the community who read a particular journal or study a particular subject. So you must adopt the style and the level of writing that is appropriate for your audience. Study them as they are manifested in a selection of highly regarded paper and in the instruction for authors for the key journals. So your supervisor and professor is not here to teach you the basic grammars and spellings. So the more time and emotional energy he or she spends on correcting the basic English uses, the less remains for issues of content or fine-tuning. So you are responsible for mastering the basics of the language with word processor or spell checkers. So having become standard writing tools, typos or other spelling errors should be very rare. So do not turn in a first draft. Most people's first drafts are terrible. Good writing is rewriting. And you should make a serious effort at editing, rewriting, and fine-tuning before you give the manuscript to anyone else to read. If you need to put a piece of writing away for a few days before you can approach it dispassionately enough to rework it, so do so. So avoid abusing word form. Use words in the form that convey your meaning as clearly and simply as possible. So do not use long words where short ones will do. For example, utilization versus use, in order to versus to. So do not use special words to make your writing seems more technical, scientific, or academic when the message is more clearly presented otherwise. So use an outline to organize your ideas and writing. When you first start a writing project, make an outline of the major heading, list the key ideas to be covered under each heading. So organize your thinking logic and the logic of your arguments at these levels, not when you are trying to write the complete grammatical and elegant sentences. Separate out the figuring out what you want to say, planning the order and logic of your arguments, crafting the exact language in which you will express your ideas. Think about the structure of paragraphs. So though most students can write reasonable sentences, a surprising number have difficulty organizing sentences into effective paragraphs. So a paragraph should begin with a topic sentence that sets the stage clearly for what will allow. Make topic sentences short and direct. Build the paragraph from the ideas introduced in your topic sentences and make the flow of individual sentences follow a logical sequence. So problems of inappropriate or inconsistent tenses are common in student writing. What you or others did in the past should be stated in the past tense. For example, data were collected. Events or objects that continue to happen or exist can be described in the present tense. For example, in this paper I examined. So whatever tense you choose, be consistent. Be careful in using might, may, and would. So they are frequently used as ways of wrestling out of making a clear statement. So caption should not merely name a table or figure. They should explain how to read it. So a caption should contain sufficient information so that a reader can understand a table or a figure, in most cases without references to the text. So very simple tables and figures may require only a title for clarity, and exceptionally complex ones may require references to the text for explanation. Do not leave caption writing to the end of the project. Write captions when you organize your research sections, and it will help you write the text. When citing a reference, focus on the ideas, not the authors, unless the person who reported a result is an important point in the statement. Literature citation should be parenthetical rather than in the body of the sentence. Show us, don't tell us. So rather than telling the readers that a result is interesting or significant, show them how it is interesting or significant. Write about your results, not your tables, figures, or statistics. So confusing and disjointed result sections often arise because the writer does not have a clear idea of the story he intends to tell. When preparing to write your result, decide on the element of the story you wish to tell. Then choose the subset of text, figures, and tables that most effectively and concisely convey your message. Organize this subset of tables and figures in a logical sequence. They write your story around them. So many no-voice paper writers begin their discussion section with a statement about problems with their methods or the items in their result about which they feel most insecure, unless they really are the most important things about your research. So save them for later. So begin a discussion with a short restatement of the most important point from your research. Use this statement to set up the ideas you want to focus on and interpreting your results and relating them to the literature. Use subheadings that structures the discussion around these ideas. In many journals, the sections result and discussions as one. Introduction and conclusions are the hardest part. So many technical writers prefer to write their introduction last because it is too difficult to craft that balance of journal context and specific focus required for a good introduction. If you need to write the introduction, first to set the stage for your own thinking. Resist the temptation to perfect it. So the introduction will likely need substantial modification by the time you have finished the rest of the paper. The same concerns apply to conclusion, abstracts, and summary. So these components of the paper are all that many people will read, and you must get your message across in a direct, crisp, or in anti-saying a manner as possible. So make your writing flow and resonate. So paper written so well that they flow and resonate are much more likely to influence your readers than the equivalent message presented in a form that is merely clear. When you find a paper that succeeds in this, study carefully how the author constructed their arguments and used language. Try to identify what makes the paper work so well. Use word processor effectively and back up your word religiously. You need not learn how to use all the more exotic features of your word processor, but learn the options that are available and how to find out the details when you need them. Minimally, be familiar with basic requirement for document formatting and basic operating system requirement. So the same comments apply to the use of the statistical package, graphic programs, and spreadsheets. Take editorial comment seriously. It may be clear from an editor's comment that they did not understand the point you were making. If so, that is a clear indication that you need to improve your writing. Also, an editor, no matter who they might be, has invested their time to help improve the quality of your writing. Respect their investments. So let us come to the heart of my presentation about how to write a scientific paper. So a well-written scientific paper explains the scientist's motivation for doing an experiment. the experimental design and execution, and the meaning of the result. So scientific papers are written in a style that is exceedingly clear and concise. So their purpose is to inform an audience of other scientists about an important issues and to document the particular approach they use to investigate that issue. So please do not think that good English is not critical in science writing. In fact, scientists try to be so concise that their English should be better than that of worker in other disciplines. If English is not your first language, then proofreading by a native speaker might be helpful. If you have read scientific papers, you will have noticed that a standard format is frequently used. This format allows a researcher to present information clearly and concisely. So basically, paper have got a number of sections. So there is the title, the abstract, the introduction and background, and the methods, the discussion, conclusion, and references. I'm going to talk to you about what goes into these sections. So titles, abstract, and keywords, that they may be descriptive information that lets readers search for and articles. And introduction, method, result, and discussion, there are some questions: why, how, what, so. In introduction, what is the context for this project? How does it fit in with other research on the topic? What is the research question? So, and method, what did the authors do to answer the research question? And in the result, what was the answer to the question? So this is often shown in tables and figures. So what is the significance of the project? How does it fit in with what else is known about the topic in the discussion section? And then references, materials, and authors cited when writing this paper. So before starting these sections, we should talk about a research question, because the first and the most important step in scientific paper writing is to choose your research question. You must choose a topic that will advance and add to the existing scientific knowledge. Even the journal editors won't accept a paper that does not have a good question. So a good research question gives the researcher more clarity on developing the study protocol, designing the study, and analyzing the data. It makes a good initial impression on the scientific journal editors and peer reviewers. It shows a well-thought researcher and increase your chances of publication in the journal. So what makes a good research question? Though this will vary for different papers and across discipline, there is an overall criterion to keep in mind while planning your research question. So what? Foremost, after choosing your research question, always ask yourself, so what? This means that the finding or result pursuing from the question must be important, interesting, and meaningful. Unobviousness. Scientific journal editors stress on novelty and unobviousness. That is, the research question should not have an obvious or an undisputed answer. You can ensure this unobviousness and provide value in different ways, such as it contributes new information that has a real-world application or leads to further lines of research, validate the existing information and its applicability, provide findings that contradict the existing literature, critically review and analyze the literature. Replication is sometimes acceptable. It is not always necessary to convey unknown information. Though your research paper, you may replicate other research observation, especially if they were controversial or weak, but it should be significant. So when you formulate your research question by fulfilling these requirements, you have probably got a worthwhile research question. Now, how to find a new research question? So it may be from the old literature. The discussion section of many papers often mention the question that remain unresolved or additional studies that can be done. You can formulate a good research question from the old literature by identifying the gaps and weaknesses in them. Attending conferences. So recent advances in any field of science are presented at the academic conferences. So participating in such conferences will help you network with experts in the field and aid in your own research. If you find a good research question, then start writing your paper. So let us start by talking about the title. Now the title needs to be about 15 words or less. That is, in a lot of space, you got to get the point quite quickly. And things that you want to include in the title are firstly the purpose. What is the question that you address? Secondly, the scope. What are the edges of this thing? So things which are generally to avoid: don't put in acronyms, don't use abbreviations, don't ever use exclamation marks. Keep it nice and professional, and you will have a great title. Types of title that can be used for scientific papers. Indicative titles indicate the subject matter of a paper, but gives no indication of any result obtained or a conclusion drawn. For example, the effectiveness of the bed nets in controlling a mosquito at different seasons of the year. Informative title give an indication of results achieved and conclusion drawn, as well as the subject matter of the paper. For example, bed nets control mosquitoes most effectively when used in the rainy season. Question type title. This type of title obviously asks a question. For example, when are bed nets most effective when used to control the mosquitoes? And main subtitle or sequel type. This approach is not likely by editors of scientific journal, because if they accept the first paper, they will be duty bound to accept the sequels. For example, the effect of bed nets on mosquitoes, their effectiveness when used only in the rainy season. Now, how to list the authors and addresses? There are no agreed rules on the right order of the authors. Some prefer to list their names alphabetically. In the past, the head of the lab, etc., was used to put her name. Now, the first author is the senior author. Senior author means the senior author is the person who did the largest part of the research. So, according to the contribution of the co-authors, they are sequentially arranged according to their contribution. If there is a largest part is given by any author, that should be a first author. So once you decide which journal your paper will be submitted to, then read the instruction for authors in that journal carefully, because it is the most important part for submitting the paper. So this is the journal structure of the research paper as we discussed. So title, abstract, keywords, this make them easy for indexing and searching. Informative, that may be attractive, that may be effective. And the main text, which is introduction, method, result, and discussion. Journal space is not unlimited. So your readers' time is also scarce. So make your article as concise as possible, more difficult than you imagine. And then we should write conclusion, then acknowledgement, references if there is some supplementary data that should be included. So next, let's talk about the abstract. So now the abstract is usually 150 to 300 words, as some of the participants are asking the limit of the abstract. So there is no limit, but there is at least that it should be a concise and in the minimum words. So the informative abstract is the most common type of project, and it follows a certain format, and we are just going to get into that. Of course, you are going to include the purpose of the paper and overview of the method and main finding, the conclusion and recommendation importantly. So you are not going to have any discussion. So you are not going to critique or evaluate the work and any subjective interpretation. no speculation, no references to other works. So you are going to keep it nice and factual. You are going to write it in the past tense. So frequently, readers of a scientific journal will only read the abstract, choosing to read at length those papers that are most interesting to them. For this reason, and because abstracts are frequently made available to scientists by various computer abstracting services, this section should be written carefully and concisely to have the greatest impact in as few words as possible. Although it appears as the first section in a paper, but most scientists write the abstract section in the last. Now, let's talk about the introduction and background. So when you write the introduction, what you want to get out of this is you want the readers to keep reading. To do that, what you want to do is provide context, in other words, with reference to existing literature. So you are going to tell them what we know and what we don't know in this particular subject area. So you are going to introduce your research question, the purpose of your study, and the question that you are going to answer. So when they read that, they want to carry on reading. So the introduction is organized to move from general information to specific information. So the background must be summarized concisely, but it should not be itemized. So limit the introduction to studies that relate directly to the present study. Emphasize your specific contribution to the topic. So the last sentence of the introduction should be a statement of objective and a statement of the hypothesis. This will be a good transition to the next section, method, in which you will explain how you proceeded to meet your objectives and test your hypothesis. How to cite sources in the introduction section. So it is important to cite sources in the introduction sections of your paper as evidence of the claim you are making. So there are ways of citing sources in the text so that the readers can find the full references in the literature cited section at the end of the paper. Yet the flow of the reading is not badly interrupted. Note that articles by one or two authors are always cited in the text using their last names. However, if there are more than two authors, the last name of the first author is given followed by the abbreviation et al. So it is acceptable and encouraged to cite more than one source for a particular statement. This gives the statement more validity in its context and suggests that your research was thorough. Next, we are going to talk about method sections, which depends largely on the type of research that you have undertaken. The basic principles apply to any research paper. Here, what must be included? So you need to state your study question, study design, data tools used to validate data, analyze the data, what software you use, what statistical test did you apply, and what assumption did you make. Now, how to write the results? So everything about your paper revolves around the results. And for that reason, I'm going to suggest that you write the result first, especially if you are working with co-authors. What you want is to draft the results and the tables and the text. Results can be changed in one and other aspects if your co-authors want. So everything's revolve around the results. So get finalized and get it agreed first. Start your writing in a logical manner. Don't discuss the result. Don't provide explanation. Don't provide any speculation. Don't interpret them. Don't hypothesize. Keep the result nice and factual. Don't ignore any negative finding. Includes any negative result, but don't try to explain them. Not this point, that is for the discussion. If you write a paper with results that are unoriginal, predictable, and trivial, it's less likely to be published. So do not include the same data in both a table and the figures. So it is the best to present the data in a table unless there is a visual information that can be gained by using a figure. For example, a figure is useful for reporting a regression analysis. Line graph. Each table and figures has several lines of text in the caption that explain the information that is being presented. They are made to stand alone. A table legend appears above it, while the legend for a figure appears below the figures. So if your table includes the result of a statistical analysis, be sure to provide the information necessary for the readers to properly evaluate the analysis. For example, the sample size. Now there are some additional tips on the results section that write with the readers in mind. Use precise and simple words. So number tables and figures separately beginning with the number 1. So do not attempt to evaluate the results in this section. Report only what you found. So it is not necessary to describe every step of your statistical analysis. You must refer in the text to each figure or table in your paper. Tables generally should report summary level data, such as mean standard deviation, rather than all your raw data. There is no need to represent the raw data in the tables or in the text. So only use a figure when the data lend themselves to a good visual representation. Avoid using figures that shows too many variables or tens at once. So how to write the discussion? So this is by far my favorite part of any paper, because in the discussion, you are not only going to reiterate your finding, but you are going to explain them and interpret them and speculate them. So this is where you bring your thoughts and ideas into the paper. So you are going to start your discussion off by reiterating your research question. The discussion has to reflect on the results. What did you find to fill the gap in knowledge that you identified? Something added and understanding on the topic, implication of your finding, practical applications, acknowledge the limitation, suggestion for future research, state the answer to the research question that you asked, and state any recommendation that can be made as a result of your finding. So how to state the acknowledgement? There are generally the 2 main things which are required to acknowledge. So any significant help received from an individual, source of special equipment and other materials are to be acknowledged. Any outside financial assistance such as grant, scholarship or contract, if any. So how to cite the reference? So this is the last section of the paper here. You should provide an alphabetical or number according to the occurrence of your paper, listing of all published work you cited in the text of the paper. Note, in most journals listed the numbered according to sequential appearance in the text. A standard format is used both to cite the literature in the text and to list these studies in the literature cited section. So consult a recent issue of the respective journal for guidance. So this is much important. Consult a recent issues of the respective journal for guidance that how to cite your literature in the text as well as in the literature cited section. So for papers published in journals, you must provide the date, title, journal name, volume number, and page number. For books, you need the publication date, title, publisher, and the place of the publications. And no reference is listed in this section unless it was cited somewhere in the text. So there are some practical tips for scientific writing. Proofread. You should check your paper to catch and correct these and other comma errors. You should avoid abbreviations by writing out the full words. Exceptions are there, including the common terms like ATP and DNA, units of measures, and mathematical or chemical formulas. Sentences should never begin with an abbreviation or an acronym. So you may wish to introduce an acronym for a term that is repeated often. If your paper deals with soybean, for example, glycine max You may use the full scientific name once and substitute thereafter. So chemical elements are not proper noun. So do not capitalize them. Only the first letter of the symbol is a capital letter. In formal writing, you should never use contractions. For example, didn't, can't, haven't. The word data is plural, as in most of the papers, generally the writer writes the data is collected, but it is the data were collected. So direct quotes should be avoided unless you are presenting another author's specific definition or original label. You can usually paraphrase the writing effectively and more concisely, taking care to properly attribute the source of your statement. Read and reread your references. Consult a textbook or another reference to help you resolve any aspects of the paper you do not understand before you start writing. You should review your writing to make sure that each sentence presents one or two clear ideas. This will also help you organize sentences within the paragraph in a logical order. In science, the word significant implies the results of a statistical test. So you should analyze your result to determine whether they are statistically significant and report the test you used. Do not use the slang. Try to use precise scientific terms where possible and avoid colloquialism and figures of the speech, somewhat rather than sort of, money, a great deal, etc. Your word processor's spell check and a grammar check function is not error-free. Remember it. It cannot tell you when to use its or it is. And it cannot tell you that a particular sentence does not make sense. Give yourself enough time to proofread and correct your paper. When describing methods and results, you should use the past tense, and the present tense is appropriately for accepted facts such as the background information presented in the introduction. In addition, you may use the present tense when you discuss your results and conclusion. Looking over other scientific papers may help you answer questions you might have on this topic. All units of measures must be metrics or international system. So there are some language issues. So there are a few which are given here, that is, be more or less specific, avoid clauses like the plague. Verbs has to agree with their subsets. Prepositions are not words to end some sentences with, and don't start a sentence with a conjugation. It is wrong to ever split an infinitive. Parenthetical remarks are unnecessary. Also, never ever use repetitive redundancies. No sentences fragments. Contractions aren't good style and shouldn't be used in formal writing. So do not be redundant. Do not use more words than necessary. One should never generalize. One word sentence, eliminate. Eliminate commas that are not necessary. Never use a big word when a diminutive one would suffice. Kill all exclamation points. Use words correctly, irregardless how others use them. Understatement is always the absolutely best way to put forth earth-shaking ideas. Use the apostrophe in its proper place and omit it when it's not needed. You need rhetorical questions. Finally, proofread carefully to see if you any word outs. So there are some ethics in scientific publishing for authenticity and accuracy. The research should be actually done. Statistical data should be done properly if they exist. The figures must include all data. Originality. The finding must be new. manuscripts should be sent to one journal only. Slicing the finding into several papers should be avoided. So credit scientists build on other works. So ideas or works of the other should be cited. Otherwise, you will be guilty of plagiarism, piracy. Everyone who qualifies for authorship in the paper should be written. Credit for authorship to all who contribute to research, design, interpretation of data, drafting of papers. Author must acknowledge individuals who do not qualify as author, but who contribute the research. Plagiarism is generally defined as taking another's idea, images, or words and representing them as one's own. So it is intellectual theft. So often plagiarism is more a consequence of intellectual laziness than intellectual dishonesty. So the consequences of plagiarism for the authors depend on the severity of the ethical misconducts. So how it implies to the practices of writing and publishing a scientific paper. So copying another's idea. So if whenever you are copying another's idea, cite prior work appropriately. So copying another's image, give reference as well as took permission from the figure authors or the publishers. So copying another words. By far the most common plagiarism problem that I forced to deal with as an editor is the copying of the another words. So the greater the amount of copying, the greater the offense. One can avoid plagiarism by proper paraphrasing, but it still requires a citation to the original. If the words are not your own, then you are quoting someone else, and it requires citation and quotation. So duplicate publication or self-plagiarisms. You cannot steal from yourself, so misrepresenting previously published work as new without the proper citation is a serious problem. So duplicate publication is a serious ethical violation. If you copy your own text or figure, then cite it. If your new work is a continuation of your old work, then cite it. So coming on the last step is to summarize the different steps in the writing a paper. Assess your work. First of all, decide what, when, and where to publish. So refrain from duplicate publication and define your purpose in publishing. So obtain and read the instruction to authors of the journal chosen. So decide who the author will be. Draft a working title and abstract. Decide on the basic form of the paper. Collect the materials under the major heading chosen. Design tables, including their titles and footnotes, design or select illustration and write titles and legends for them. So write for permission to reproduce any previously published tables, illustrations, or other materials that will be used. Write a topic outline and perhaps a sentence outline. Write, type, or dictate a preliminary draft of the text quickly to give it unity. Check completeness of the references assembled. So put the manuscript or typescript away for a few days and re-examine the structure of the paper. So check the illustration and tables and make the final version. So reread the references you cite and check your own accuracy. In citing them, check for consistency and reduce the number of abbreviations and footnotes. Type the paper. Then correct the grammar and polish the scientific style. So type several copies of the corrected paper. Ask for criticism from co-authors and friends. So make any necessary alteration. So compose a now title and abstract table for information retrieval. List the index terms and assemble the manuscript. So compile the references list. Cross-check references against the text and ensure that all bibliography details are the correct. So retype and check transcript. Obtain a final critical review from a senior colleague. Make any final correction. So here's some bibliography from where I made my presentation. Thank you for your patience with me. any questions and comments. And there are some two quotations from McCarrow, that is, state your facts as simple as possible, even boldly. No one wants flower of eloquence or literary ornaments in a research article. And Gerald Pial said, without publication, science is dead.
Yes, that's really amazing. It has been a pleasure listening to you. You have presented all your facts, all the ideas, and all the relevant information beautifully and methodically. I'm sure the participants would have enjoyed listening to you. The stage is now open for any questions to the resource person. If anybody has a question, please feel free to ask now. Dr. Vivek will answer your questions.
Yes, anyone.
So good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, this is Lakshmi, sir. So I have a question, sir. So we are following all these guidelines and all the methods that has been prescribed. We are following the format, but why in some of the Scopus journals the articles are rejected? So what are the major reasons, sir?
So you should first of all go for the instruction for the author whenever you are submitting your paper. So you should read carefully the instructions for the authors. So it should be properly according to that journal.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anything more that you can add to? Vinita Shetty is asking a question.
Yes, sir, please.
Good evening, sir. This is Vinita.
Yes, please.
Sir, I have a doubt that we can make a paraphrasing. Is it a plagiarism for that?
Without citing the original work, it is also a plagiarism, because otherwise there is some software which can identify that from where you are paraphrasing the original work.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good evening, sir. This is Kirtiranjan Badheri.
Good evening, dear.
Sir, actually want to say, can the conceptual research be done in a different way?
Yeah, it can be, because there are a different scientific writing. As I told you in my first slide, there is a different way to represent your work, like a research article, or it may be a conceptual also. So you can write.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you.
Any more questions? Hello.
Good evening, sir.
Please
Yes.
go on.
Yes,
I would
please.
like to know what is H index and DOI, how to test that, sir?
Pardon, please.
What is meant by H index?
H index.
H index and DOI numbers and all. H index for the journal. For the publication of the paper.
Okay. It's for the publication of factor. So there is different ways to find out the H index of the paper that is generally given in the different sites. So it is just another lecture for the how to publish the research paper, and where we will discuss about the indexing of this H index.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Vinita Sethi. Yes, please.
Yeah, sir. Which paper having a value, sir? Empirical paper or conceptual paper, sir?
Empirical papers have the more value as compared to conceptual value.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Any more questions from the participants?
Will this recording be available to us later on to see?
First, you have to contact the admin. You can write to them, and then we will to guide you on that. You can contact Dr. Regine, the admin. He will be able to guide you. Is that clear to you, Tanushree, madam?
Yes, yes.
You have right. The Cape Commonwealth Trust, they have the access to that. So please contact them directly. You can write to them. You can send email and ask them to share with you a recording of this. Okay, thank you for asking that question, ma'am. And I would like to ask Vivek Chandler, sir, in what way direct quoting is different from paraphrasing, and how does that affect the plagiarism level?
Sir, direct quoting is just the quotation which is given by any author or in any book. So that is a direct quoting. So you can take it as it is. For example, some statement which is given by the someone. So that is the quotation. So it's the direct quoting. But when any definition or any paragraph or any line, you change it according to your own word, but the words which are used from your the original works. So that is the paraphrasing.
Sir, but you said that there are software programs which can detect paraphrasing. Is that true, sir?
Actually, I don't know the name of the software, but there is some software which identify the number of words in a paragraph which are used from one paragraph. So if
there are two popular plagiarism checking software, sir. You have Turnitin and Alchemy. Sir?
Your voice is not clear, sir.
Yes, you have Turnitin and Alchemy. Turnitin and Erkin are the two popular software used in India by Indian universities.
Your voice is fumbling, sir. It is not clear, but there is actually I have heard this statement from in some conferences by some eminent speakers. So there is some software like that, but I didn't seen yet.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. No problem. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the third day's program, the International Virtual Faculty Development Program on Research and Writing. And today we had the pleasure of listening to Dr. Vivek Chandler, and he has guided us on quite a few beautiful aspects of research publication and research writing. And I'm sure the participants enjoyed, benefited from listening to these two presentations.